This household earns around £320,000 a year. Their life works, nice home, good holidays, children well looked after. Nothing is obviously going wrong. And if you ask them, they'd probably say they feel fine. But look underneath the comfort. If something shifted this year, a gap between jobs, a mortgage reset, a renovation cost at the wrong time, one thing they didn't see coming, the money they could easily reach and use is much thinner than the lifestyle suggests. Their ISA has about £12,000 in it. Much of the rest is locked, committed, tied up in property, or already mentally assigned. So this isn't a story about struggling. They're not. It's that the life feels comfortable while the margin for error stays quietly narrow. One household is just an example, but the pattern behind it is what's worth seeing and whether it's quietly yours. Let me show you what this looks like underneath. This is a composite, patterns I see again and again over time, not one specific family. The numbers are illustrative, the pressure behind them is real. Two senior professionals earning around £320,000 between them in London or the commuter belt. Now, £320,000 sounds like it should end every money worry. And to be clear, this is a genuinely high income. So let me show you where it goes, because this is the part that surprises people. After tax, a household like this might see £16,000 a month landing in their bank, a lot of money. Then the committed costs start. The mortgage and the family home, somewhere like Wandsworth or Dulwich, not to mention easily £5,000 a month. Two young children in nursery in London, another £3,000 to £4,000. So before a single holiday, car, commute, or the help that keeps two careers running, roughly one person's whole take-home salary has already been spoken for. A few years ago, they held ISAs and investments. Most of it was cashed in for the property. What they could reach quickly today is about £12,000. It's not that there's no surplus. There is every year, but it already has jobs before it lands. The mortgage overpayment, the renovation, the next deposit. It keeps flowing back into the same structure and almost none of it into something they could actually reach. Then let's imagine one ordinary thing goes wrong, a restructure, and one of the two incomes pauses for 3 months. Nothing dramatic, it happens all the time. 2 good salaries, a house, 2 growing pensions, and 3 months could still leave them feeling broke. The salary was carrying everything, and when it paused, there was very little underneath it. I know how quickly that could happen because a version of that happened to us. A few years ago, we were moving house, 2 good salaries, 2 properties, on paper, everything lined up, but it all depended on the timing going perfectly. Every bit of savings has gone into the deposit and the transaction fees. Credit was maxed to set up the new house. One rental payment came in late, a payroll date slipped, and for a few days, we came close to missing a mortgage payment. Not because we didn't earn enough, we did. The move had quietly done 2 things at once, pushed everything the household needed each month higher, and drained the little we had set aside to catch a problem. So when a few small things went wrong, there was nothing underneath it to absorb it. The comfort was real, the floor wasn't there. And from the outside, a household like this looks completely fine. No decision looks obviously reckless or wrong. Right up till the moment the timing stops cooperating. Let's step back for a second, because this is not quite the story we're used to hearing. The usual vision is dramatic, the high earners who blew it, the flashy lifestyle, the reckless spending, the millionaire who ran out of money. Something visibly went wrong. This is quieter than that and harder to spot. Nothing here looks like a mistake. The house is sensible, the spending is normal, and the surplus is real. From the surface, everything's fine, right up until a shock arrives and finds nothing underneath. I call it the comfortable blind spot. It's what happens when income is high enough to make a household feel secure, while the load quietly grows faster than the floor underneath it. Nothing feels wrong, so nothing feels urgent, and because nothing feels urgent, the gap stays open year after year. The income is high enough to cover it, for now. That's what makes it so hard to see. Not a visible strain, it's the absence of it. There are 2 things people usually say when they see a household like this. The first is, it's a lifestyle of inflation. They earn more, they spend more. And there's a grain of truth in it. But look at where the money actually went. Most of it is either necessary or entirely reasonable. And inflation is the wrong word. The postcode that costs a premium because it's near the job, the school, or the life two careers depend on. They became parents, which isn't inflation, it's just expensive. Raising children in the UK costs a great deal. And a lot of what looks like lifestyle is really the education premium, paid one way or the other, either in the price of a postcode with the right schools or the private school fees. They often have to pay for domestic help that makes both jobs possible in the first place. The convenience of spending is really the cost of two people running at full capacity. Even the property feels like the responsible thing to do. So this wasn't money frittered away. It was money doing mostly sensible things, but a lot of it didn't just get spent. It got built into the structure, especially property. The second thing people say is, well, they could just cut back. And here it's worth being honest on both sides. Some of it can't be cut, at least not quickly. The mortgage, the childcare, the commitments, none of that unwinds in a month. And the part that can be trimmed, the holidays, the renovation, it isn't a plan, it's a stressful fallback. Because for a household like this, cutting back isn't a spreadsheet exercise, it's a real loss. It's unwinding pieces of life they worked so hard to build. And the moment they're relying on scaling back quickly, the strain moves inside the house. If one of them is between jobs, they may feel pressure to take the first job that pays, not the one that actually fits. A household that looked comfortable from the outside started to feel welded to the income that funds it. So the issue was never that they are reckless, and yes, they could tighten up in places, but the cutting back treats it as a spending problem when it is actually a structural problem, and the income has been quietly hiding that. The margin for error is thinner than the income makes it look. Most of what we just walked through is understandable, even necessary. But there's one move that feels like the most responsible things you can do with money, yet it can still tilt the whole structure without anyone noticing: property. Property feels safe. You can see it, you live in it, everyone treats it as the responsible thing to own. Paying down the mortgage feels steady, buying more feels like building wealth. And none of that is wrong. Property can be part of a household security. The difficulty is proportion, and the second cost most people don't price in. Property doesn't only lock money away, it brings its own load. The service charge, the insurance, the maintenance that turns up whether you plan for it or not. If it's let, the management and letting fees on top. In the UK, those costs are often higher than people expect, especially in the postcode this type of household is buying into. You pay the location premium twice, once in the price, and then every year in the cost of keeping it. So a second property can look like it's adding security while quietly doing the opposite, adding to the load, not the floor. And even setting the cost aside, there's the reach problem. You can't spend a bedroom 1 year goes sideways. You can't ask the mortgage for some of it back when the timing slips, at least not quickly or easily. Property can hold wealth. It just can't always be the thing you stand on when you need some slack. Which is the point underneath all of this? A thin floor on its own is a savings problem. You top it up. A thin floor under a load that keeps rising is a structural problem, and that isn't fixed by saving a little bit more. The shape needs to change. Before you can change the shape, there's a question worth answering, one most households skip straight past. What is all this structure actually meant to protect? That's really the question underneath security. Not how do I earn more, not how do I optimize the last percentage, just what a must hold, whatever happens next. And I want to be clear about what I don't mean. For a high earner, security isn't about have nowhere to live or nothing to eat. The real loss is being forced to unwind the life you carefully built and actually love. The house, the schools, the trips, the rooms to breathe. Downgrading that is a genuine loss. A plan that depends on you accepting it isn't a plan I'd trust either. So there was never about cutting pennies or making budgeting your second job. You didn't work this hard for a life you're only allowed to enjoy carefully. Security here isn't about deprivation, it's about protection. But protection doesn't happen on its own. It means some of the income have to be kept yours. Surplus kept back on purpose, not whatever happens to be left at the end of the month. When you're time poor and already carry a heavy mental load, just be more disciplined isn't a plan, it's one more thing to fail at. So it has to be intentional by design, not held together by willpower. And then there's the part most people miss. Security comes from what a surplus becomes. Income is a flow. It arrives because you keep showing up, working, billing, performing. Stop, and the flow stops. Security is what's left when the flow is interrupted. And surplus doesn't always become security. Left alone, it drifts into bigger house, another commitments, more life to maintain. It quietly becomes obligation instead. So you can earn a great deal and be building more obligation instead of security without noticing. When your obligation is high and the margin for error is low and everything depends on the income continuing, that is not security, that's exposure. So if a household earning £320,000 can still be this exposed underneath the comfort, the question stops being about them. It becomes, what is your income actually becoming? Here are two questions that may be worth sitting with. First, if you look at the last 3 years of surplus, the money that wasn't immediately needed for tax, mortgage, childcare, and bills, what did it actually become? Lifestyle, property, mortgage overpayment, cash sitting there with no real job, pension you can't touch for decades, or an actual floor, money set aside to hold if life shifted. Take a second with it. And then the second question, the one most people never ask, what did that surplus commit you to? A bigger mortgage, a renovation, a set of school expectations, a lifestyle that now feels normal, a cost base that quietly assumes both incomes keep flowing exactly as they do today, because that's the part that's easy to miss. Surplus doesn't only build assets, sometimes it builds obligations. And when the obligation grows faster than the floor, a household can feel comfortable and be exposed at the same time. If you want to see your own version of that map, the load, the floor, and the gap between them, I've linked the free financial structure review below. It helps you to see which pattern your income is currently creating. And there's a reason this gap is so common, even among people who can see it perfectly well. Knowing the floor is missing isn't the hard part, building it is. Because once you try, a simple question can open a whole chain of decisions. How much cash is enough? Which costs are genuinely committed? What should be invested? Which account should you use? What about the old pensions, the company shares, the ISA you keep meaning to sort? And suddenly, fixing the structure starts to feel like a second job you've never applied for. That's the next trap. And it's the one that quietly keeps this one in place. That's the next episode. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.